All right. So we're in 2 Kings. We're starting off in 2 Kings chapter 1 because that's a good place to start off. And I remember when we talked about the book of Kings, it was originally what? Like one book, right? It was originally like one big scroll, a lot of sheepskins, and they divided it here. Sort of right in the middle of, this king, Ahaziah. So Ahaziah is a king. We left off talking about him, the son of Ahab. Ahab was a king over Israel, right? Ahab was king over Israel, bad guy, super bad guy. His wife, worse. And so Ahab dies. Ahaziah becomes king in 51. And what is the end of 1 Kings? What commentary do we have of Ahaziah? Was he a good, upstanding citizen? He did evil, so not good. So not a good king, and he did evil. He walked in the way of his father and his mother, and Jeroboam as well. And then we start off with chapter 1. Now, chapter 1 begins with this phrase, "Now Moab rebelled." Moab was sort of under Ahab, Omri was the king in Israel, who had kind of was a very strong commander and had brought Moab under subjection. Ahab kind of continued that, and Moab rebels when Ahab dies. Now, we have some calamity that comes upon Ahaziah, one because of unrest. So now Moab is fighting against him. And I don't have my clicker, guys. Do y'all have I've totally spaced on the PowerPoint. What do you mean it doesn't have any slides? It does too have slides. Okay. If you want to put up slide 20 and just put all the little doodads underneath it, that'd be awesome. Thanks, Oz. Appreciate it. So there are, where am I? So they're rebelling they take this opportunity to rebel against Ahaziah. Ahaziah is getting calamity politically and also physically, you'll see in just a moment. And so they rebelled. What does it say here about Ahaziah in verse 2? What's that? He fell. So apparently OSHA didn't approve the lattice work that he had. How many of you seen lattice work before? Anybody? I guess 19? Is that 20? Can we go 19? And just put all the little doodads up there? There you go. All of them. Fine. It's called the passing of authority. We're going to talk about this actually someday. So here we go. Okay, so we're talking about under the heading of Elijah and what's going on with Elijah. So we're going to be continuing this discussion of Elijah today. But in that we have this Ahaziah, lattice work. He falls out, and what happens to him? He became ill. Whatever happened to him, he fell out of the lattice work. What was happening? How he fell out of the lattice work? We'll never know, right? But he fell out, and he became ill because of it. Now, what does he do? Yeah, he sent for one of the Baal, one of the false gods, and not even in another country. Go to another country and talk to one of these gods. Now, it's interesting here. The name Baal-zebub is literally translated "Lord of the Flies." Is a literal translation of that. Now, there are some speculations that the author, everybody who's reading this probably knows who he's talking about. And because there's maybe a one-letter difference between Lord of Princes and Lord of Flies, they changed that. This is just a guess, that they changed it just sort of ha-ha, funny, kind of little letter change there. But there's also some speculation that Lord of the Flies, there's actually a season. Anyway, more than you wanted to know. But Lord of the Flies, and he goes, "Hey, will I recover?" Now, Elijah steps in. Elijah's good at stepping in when kings make bad choices. And this was another one of those occasions. He steps in. Angel of the Lord says to Elijah the Tishbite, "Arise, go up and meet the messengers." So the king sends messengers, and he goes to these messengers that are on the way, and he says, "Is it because there's no God in Israel that you are going to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Now therefore, says the Lord, you shall not come down from the bed where you have gone up, but you shall surely die." Then Elijah departed. That's Elijah's MO, right? He delivers the message, says you're going to die, and says ciao, and leaves, right? So he's out, drops the mic, and leaves. In this situation, the messengers go back, and the king is surprised. Why? Why is the king surprised that the messengers came back? Yeah, like they're supposed to take a while, right? You're back so soon. Why are you back so soon? And he said, well, there's this guy that came and talked to us, and he gave us this message, and he says you're going to die. And what does the king ask? What did he look like? Who was it? Who was this guy, right? Verse 7, and they said to him, what kind of man is he that came in to meet you and spoke these words? And they answered him, he was a hairy dude. He was a hairy leather girdle bound about his loins. And he said, oh, it's Elijah. Do you think he knew it was Elijah? In the back of his mind, it's probably going to be Elijah. Don't say Harry. Oh, it's Elijah. What did his father Ahab say about Elijah? You troubler of Israel. Like they were not besties, okay? And so I think they've passed that on to Ahaziah, has got that same kind of contempt for him. And so, and then we have this interesting scene that could be played out in some anime cartoons. But the king sent to him a captain of 50 with his 50. So he sends 51 guys out to find Elijah. Does it take 51 to find a guy? If you mean ill, probably, right? So they go out and they find him, and he's sitting on a hill. So he's not hiding, okay? He's not hiding. He's sitting on a hill. In my mind, on a lot of these situations with the prophets, I imagine that God said, hey, why don't you just sit on this hill and wait a second? And Elijah's like, okay, I'll sit here. In my mind, that's just me. Okay, so he's sitting on the hill, and they come and find him, and he said, "O man of God, the king says, come down." And Elijah replied to the captain of the 50, "If I'm a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50. Then fire came down from heaven and consumed him and his 50. What is up with Elijah and fire? That's just that's his button, right? Shift B, fire. So that's what he gets but Ahaziah had to learn respect for who Elijah was as part of this. Ahaziah had to learn respect. You don't just go demand a presence and audience in this way, in this fashion. So did we learn a lesson that time? Nope, it happens again. So he stays on the hill, another 50 come, and so he said to them another 50 of 50, and he said to the king, "O man of God, thus says the king, come down quickly." Boom, fire, toast. Okay, so what are we not learning? What are we not learning here? Okay, so he again sent a captain. Do you think at that point all his captains of 50 are like, not me, right? So they send another captain of 50 with his 50, and he goes out there. This guy, in my mind, he's crawling. At the last 100 yards, he's crawling on his hands and knees. What does he say? "O man of God, please let my life and the lives of these 50 servants of yours be precious in your sight," which is a fancy way of saying, please don't kill us, right? That's a fancy way of saying that. And he basically kind of asks, and the angel of the Lord said to Elijah, "Go down with him, do not be afraid of him." Obviously, because this guy could have just said boo. Elijah could have said boo, and these guys would have been just jumping. So he goes with them. Why is Ahaziah wanting a presence? Elijah has already told him what's going to happen, right? Well, maybe he's got to say it to my face. Say it to my face. Tell me in my face that I'm going to die. And does the message change? When Elijah gets to Ahaziah, does the message change at all? You're still going to die. It's almost word for word the same message, and it doesn't change. What happens? What's interesting is that, but you shall surely die, we have here at the end of this section. And then verse 17, so he died. So God speaks and it happens. All right, we're going to see this several times. You've seen it in the Bible, right? God speaks and it happens. God said, you're going to die, so Ahaziah died, according to the word of the Lord, which Elijah had spoken. Which is interesting. Did Elijah have any power in that whatsoever? None. He was just a bearer of the message. What happened because God said it was going to happen, and Elijah was the bearer of that message. Does that change today? We are ambassadors for Christ. We bear the message, and it's going to happen. He who is faithful has promised. We just bear the message. Now, we don't get like fire and Control-Shift-Fire button or anything like that, like Elijah had, but we do have the message here, right? And here is the message, and it's going to happen. You can be in Isaiah and not believe, that's fine, it's up to you, you know. And Elijah's like, yeah, whatevs, you know, if you believe or not, God is going to make it happen. And so it's the same thing for us today as far as bearers of a message. And so he didn't have a son, so his brother becomes king in his place. And so he becomes king, and talks about what's written in the works of Isaiah in the book of the Chronicles. Chapter 2, what heading do you have for chapter 2? Elijah is taken up into heaven, right? This is a pretty neat story. You may have heard this before. There's flannel graphs of this one. This is a pretty big one in the flannel graph scene. So they come about, and the Lord has about to take Elijah up in a whirlwind. The way this reads is the person who's writing it writes it, obviously, is writing it after the fact to people who know sort of maybe have known this story, but he's giving them more details about what had happened. And when he gives them, he says, when it's about to take up in the whirlwind, this is what's going to happen. And Elijah says to Elisha, I'm going to go down to Gilgal. And Elijah said to Elisha, stay here, please. The Lord has sent me as far as Bethel. So they're in Gilgal, and he sent me to Bethel. But Elisha says what? It's like basically a double oath. As the Lord lives and as you live, I'm not separating from you. I'm going to go with you. I will not leave you. So he goes with him. This happened several times. They go down to Bethel, and they have the sons of the prophets. And we talked about the sons of the prophets, who are either those who are studying under the prophets, who are sort of wanting to be upcoming prophet groupies. We don't know all the details about what the sons of the prophets are, but apparently they had several places where they studied and came together. And Bethel was one of those places. And as they're going down to that way, and they come down there, and he says, so they went out to Bethel, and the sons of the prophets who were there came out and said, hey, did you know? 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 Hey, in my opinion, is kind of what, hey, he's gonna get taken up. And so they know what's going to happen. So the sons of the prophets know what's going to happen. And how does Elisha respond to that? Yes, I know, be still. Which is the old way of saying, chill out, please. Okay, I know we don't need to talk about this. Everybody knows this is not the appropriate way to talk about somebody who's going to be going up this way. So just chill, okay? Elijah says to him again, Elisha, please stay here, for the Lord has sent me to Jericho. But he said, as the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you. So second time, he says this and he goes on the same kind of thing. The prophets, sons of the prophets come out, did you know, did you know, did you know? And he says, yes, I know, chill, again to him. And again, Elijah says what? Stay here. Stay here this time. And Elisha says what? No. Respectfully, no. I'm going to go with you. I'm not going to leave you. So the two of them went on in verse 6. Now, as they go down to Jericho, they actually go down to Jericho, down to the Jordan. The 50 kind of follow them, and then kind of stop. And the two keep going out to the Jordan. And as they approach the Jordan, what does Elijah do? It's kind of cool. Yeah, he takes his mantle off, his camel hair hide jacket, and hits the water with it, and it whoop, and they cross on dry ground. What's interesting here is that the two of them crossed over on dry ground. He did not cross Jordan alone. Is it significant that he didn't go by himself? Here's a huge transition situation for Elijah. He doesn't know exactly how this is going to go, but he didn't go by himself. Sometimes you need somebody with you. You're going to go through something that's heavy. You're going to go through something that you don't know what's going to happen. And somebody being there with you is just enough, right? And so he didn't cross Jordan alone. It's also interesting that this is sort of something that's similar to a kind of a Moses-Joshua thing. Moses-Joshua did somewhat similar thing, but like the opposite direction, right? When they come into the promised land. So this is also kind of seen as like a passing of the torch, a symbolic crossing the Jordan, and we'll see that again as he comes back over. And so they cross over the Jordan. What do they do when they get to the other side of the Jordan? What unfolds over there? Well, Elijah basically asks him, like, you've been with me this whole time. And he says, what shall I do for you? Right? And what does he ask of Elijah? Elisha says, give me a double portion. Give me like 2 pieces of cake. Give me a double portion. What that literally means is a double mouthful. The language is the same as the inheritance of the oldest son. The oldest son would receive a double portion of the inheritance. And so maybe he's talking more metaphorically about inheriting what the older son would inherit. He doesn't want to be just one of the sons of the prophets. He wants to take on and be the successor kind of situation. And how does Elijah respond? That's a hard thing. Now it can be taken 2 ways. One thing can be, I can't grant that. And he even says, if you see me taken up, if you see what happens, then you know that your request has been answered. Maybe Elijah is thinking, hey, I want your sandals, is what he thinks Elisha's going to say. Or, can I have your leather girdle? Maybe he's asking for, but he asks for this. And Elijah's like, I can't give you that. It's a hard thing. Or he's saying, what you don't know what you're asking for. The duty you're asking for is a hard thing. So it could be either side of that. Exactly. Did y'all know if you hear that? What did Jesus' disciples ask via their mom? One to sit on the left and the right? And Jesus is like, you don't know what you're asking, right? That's not how this goes. And they would have to suffer. The disciples did suffer in their service, but in this situation, he's asking for, and he tells them, if you see what's going on or what happens, then it shall be so. And in verse 11, as they were going along and talking, so they were still walking and still talking, just waiting for this to happen. Have you ever just waited for something to happen that you know is like, I'm not sure what it's going to be like. Is it going to hurt? You don't know. And they're just going along talking, waiting for that moment. What were they talking about? We don't know. But it would have been interesting to hear. What finally separates them? Who separated them? In the end, who separated them? God. Elijah has tried over and over again to tell Elisha, no, you can stay here, stay here, stay here, stay here. And Elisha says no, 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 until God said yes. Until God separated them, Elisha was by his side. I think that is significant to talk about their relationship. And as he's going up, he's crying out, my father, the chariot of Israel and his horsemen. So here is a close relationship that we see mirrored also in Paul and Timothy, right? This sort of spiritual, maybe father-son kind of relationship, very close as that happens. And they transition. And then he takes the mantle that was left behind, and he goes back to the river. And he goes to the river, and he strikes the water, and what does he say? Where's the God of Elijah? Is it gonna happen? Am I taking up the mantle? Am I gonna walk on dry ground, or am I swimming across this? He hits it, and the waters part, and he's taken up the mantle of matrix of leadership kind of situation as he goes into this period of his life as a servant. Now, what's interesting, as we initially, right when we get across the river, everybody recognizes that this leadership has passed onto Elisha, right? The prophets there said the spirit of Elijah rests on Elisha. Everybody recognizes that. And so they say to him in verse 16, they say to him, behold, now there are with your servants 50 strong men. Please let them go and search for your master. They're wanting to look for Elijah. So Elijah gets beamed up, okay? And say, hey, let's go try and find him. It's like, where's Waldo kind of thing. Let's go find him. Why? And Elijah's like, no, don't. There's no point. And they're like, yes, please, yes, please, yes, please, fine, go. And they go. Yeah, but I don't know if they think this is like a game or something. I have no idea why they're going to go look for him. So they go look for him, and they come back 3 days later, and Elisha is still in Jericho, and what are they saying? We can't find him. Obviously, right? I totally told you before you left that you weren't going to find him, and you didn't find him. Didn't I not say to you, in verse 18, do not go. Verse 19, the men of the city said to Elisha, behold, now the situation of the city is pleasant as the Lord sees, but the water is bad, and the land is unfruitful. And so he performs this of a second sort of miraculous thing, and he purifies the land. How does he do that? How does he purify the water? Salt in what? In a new bowl or new jar, right? And new jar, never been used, and salt. Salt is a purification. So pure things, and we put them in the water, and the water becomes clean. And he says, thus the Lord, I purified these waters. There shall not be foam there, death, or unfruitfulness any longer. So apparently they were just nasty. There's foam and all kinds of stuff in this water. Incidentally, in that area, there are natural deposits of uranium and things that are kind of that way. And naturally, radiation is coming up, leaching up out of the ground in some of the waters in that area. Naturally. I know this because I Googled it. But anyway, there are natural things. So it could have been that would have been the case. Hey, we have like glowing water, and there's like these little lizards, look like Godzilla coming out of them. Would you mind cleaning these? Could you mind taking care of this? So we don't know exactly the extent of the water, but it got cleaned. And then 23, we have this interesting, and I'm supposed to be advancing these. Here's the path of where they went down. Sorry, totally left. So we're talking about the work of Elijah, beginning in chapter 2, 15 verses through chapter 9. And so Elisha is at this point mocked. Have you heard this story before? This is the favorite story of bald men everywhere, right? Yes. So some of you guys are back there. I love this story. This is awesome. Okay. So they went up. Then he went up from there to Bethel, and as he was going, by the way, young lads came out. Now these are young men. These are not like little school kids. Okay. These are young men, some ruffians, maybe a Jewish gang. I don't know, but these are not like little school kids. Okay. These are not like little school kids. So please do not get that idea. So they came out, and they're mocking him. And what are they telling him? Why go up? Why go up? Elisha had just gone up, right? Elijah had just gone up. And so they're telling Elisha, hey, why don't you go up? Why don't you just leave it alone, right? Bald head. And it's not like they just said it once. They kept mocking him. If you want to write out there Deuteronomy chapter 27, 14 through 26, talking about how, you're not supposed to do that. And also 2 Chronicles 36, 15 and 16. This happens again in another situation where people are mocking a servant of God. So they mock him, and he turns around and curses them in the name of the Lord, and 2 female bears came out. Why female? They are meaner. That is truth. They even say that about David. Remember when we were talking about how David and his men fight? David and his men fight like she-bears separated from their cubs, right? So they're mean. You don't mess with the she-bear. And they have 2 of them that go out, and they tore up the 42 lads of their number. So there may have been more than 42, but 42 were torn up. Now we don't know if they died or not, right? They just got tore up, okay? But we don't know if they died. And so he goes back to Mount Carmel, and then from there he goes back to Samaria, and spends a lot of time in Samaria. Now we are going to flash back and look at some details about some kings in chapter 3. Jehoram meets the Moab rebellion. in chapter 3 deals with this. Jehoram, the son of Ahab, became king over Israel. We kind of know that already. We've talked about that. In the 10th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. Verse 2, he did evil in the sight of the Lord, though not like his father and mother. He put away the sacred pillar of the Baal when his father had made, but he clung to the religion that Jeroboam had set up. And so now Mesha, king of Moab, was a sheep herder or sheep breeder. And they used to pay to Israel 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. That's what they paid to Ahab. And when Ahab died, they decided to revolt. The whole like sword in the air, plaid skirt, freedom kind of thing. We're not going to do this. We're not going to give you our sheep. So they cry freedom, and basically this is part of the calamity that comes upon them for what the deviating from what God has done. And so Jehoshaphat ends up going with them. Ahab died, the king of Moab rebelled. King Jeroboam sent the word to Samaria, sent out of Samaria at the time, and mustered all Israel. And then he went and said to Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, saying, the king of Moab is rebelling against me. Will you go with me? And Jehoshaphat says what? In verse 7. Yes, I'll go with you, right? I'll go up. Now, wait a second. I've heard this somewhere before. Did you hear this before? Is he not learning his lesson? He got in trouble for going up with Ahab. He got in trouble for building ship with Ahaziah, right? And now he's going to go up again this time. He's a slow learner, this king, right? A slow learner. But he says, I'll go up. And so they go. And they go up. Now they go around the circuit of 7 days, it says in verse 9. So they go around the bottom of the Dead Sea and up around to Moab, okay? So Moab's kind of on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and they go down and around possibly to pick up Edom and some help from Edom because Judah was over Edom at that time, and so they could demand some soldiers as they went through that way. And so they go up. And as they're going, in verse 10, they're not getting a lot of water, and it says, at last, for the Lord has called these 3 kings to give them into the hand of Moab. This is the voice of despair from the king of Israel. But Jehoshaphat said, is there not a prophet of the Lord here? That's sort of like his MO too, right? What's God have to say about this? At this point, have they asked anything of God? They haven't asked. As far as we know, they have not asked anything of God. And the king of Israel says the Lord sent them. As far as we know, this was just their own demise. They said, hey, let's go do this. And they're like, hey, that's a good idea. Let's go fight against them. There's nothing saying that God is involved in this at all. And so they decide to inquire of the Lord, and who's there to answer? Elisha. Elisha, the son of Shaphat, is here, who used to pour water on the hands of Elijah. So Jehoshaphat says the Lord is with him. They ask him, and Elisha is asked, and Elisha said to the king of Israel, what do I have to do with you? Go to the prophets of your father and the prophets of your mother. Like, why are you all of a sudden caring about what the Lord has to say, right? It's part of what he's saying. The king of Israel said to him, no, for the Lord of God has called us the kings together for them, put them in the hand of Moab. And Elisha says, as the Lord of hosts lives, before whom I stand, were it not that I regard the presence of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, I would not look at you nor see you. I would not look at your mug if it wasn't for Jehoshaphat. Is basically what he's saying, right? Then he says, bring me a minstrel. Bring me a minstrel. So he asks for a minstrel. And when the minstrel starts playing, we have the voice of the message of God. He tells them to make some trenches in the valley, and he'll give them water. But basically, he gives them water by sending it via a rainstorm that happens in the distance, long far away, and the water eventually fills up these trenches and gives them the water. And he says that you should go up against Moab, and you should cut down all their trees, and you're going to throw rocks in their orchards and in their in all over the place, and you're going to do what? What else does he say that you're going to do with them? What are they going to do to them? Strike every fortified city, cut down all the fruitful trees, cut down all the good trees, and fill their land with stones. Basically, it's sort of like a scorched earth campaign, right? Is basically what they're supposed to do. Now, how many of you have like prepared a garden before? Anybody? Here it's not an issue so much, but how many of you have prepared a garden where there's not sand, where there's actually rocks. Okay, yes. So that's this area. So you prepare an area, you have to dig all the rocks out of it, and it becomes like a wall around your place. And so they're saying, throw all the rocks back in there. Put all the rocks back in there, because that's going to take them longer to recover from this process. And so they go and they do that, and they fight against the kings, and it's not going well for those kings there, the king of Moab. They eventually get together for battle, and they see all the trenches, and they think that's blood, and they think that they've already been fighting, and so they go down to fight against him, and it was sort of a trap, and they begin killing all the guys from Moab, and they begin doing these things, cutting down all the trees, and the king of Moab is shut up in one of his cities, and they try and break through with 700 swords, 700 men with swords, try to break through to the king of Edom. Why the king of Edom? Maybe he's thinking he can make an alliance. If he gets through to the king of Edom, he can make an alliance. We don't know why, but he can't do it. And so verse 27, what does he do? He offers his son up on the wall as a sacrifice. And that basically rallies the troops of the Moabites. And it says there came a great wrath against Israel, and they departed from him and returned to their own land. So this must have been a rallying thing for the Moabites, and they sort of eventually dispel everybody and get out of there. So chapter 3 ends with them quelling this revolt of the Moabites, and we'll pick up from there next Wednesday. Any questions, comments, anything? All right. Thank you very much for your time this evening.